You know that Nexus, we've been asking you to join us, each person as an individual, as a family, join us on this long spiritual journey. Well, if you look through the Bible and begin to ask yourselves, what are some of the greatest spiritual journeys? One has to be in the Old Testament where the nation of Israel, led by Joshua, is crossing over the Jordan River. And so today we're going to look at this spiritual journey of over 2 million Jewish people. The nation of Israel are going to cross over this Jordan River. But first I want to set the stage for when they get to the edge of the river and God has to do this huge miracle. Let's go back just a little bit. You know, Moses was leading the people. And they were in Egypt, and Pharaoh was being harsh to them. So God's going to lead them out of Egypt, and they're going to follow Moses. And they follow Moses out of Egypt, and Pharaoh and all of his chariots and all of his armies, they chase after Moses and the nation of Israel, and they get to the Red Sea, and it is there. If you've seen the movie Charlton Heston, there's Moses. He lifts up his staff, and the Red Sea parts, and all of Israel goes across the Red Sea. And when they get to the other side, they look back, and here comes Pharaoh. Here come the chariots and the horses and all the armies of Egypt, and they're coming. And when they get to the middle of the Red Sea, the waves come crashing over. And so Moses now says, look what God has done. And so now they're creating their own nation. But Moses himself goes against and does some things God doesn't want him to do. The leaders of the nation of Israel begin to rebel. So now, over here on the other side of the Red Sea, we hear about the nation of Israel just wandering in the desert for 40 years. And at the end of that 40 years, Moses is no longer here. Those who were leaders and in charge, who had crossed over the Red Sea, who had rebelled against God, was not following after God, they now have passed. It's 40 years later. Joshua is the leader, and now God says it is time to go to the promised land. But first, we're going to have to cross the Jordan River. And this is where we pick up our story in Joshua chapter 3. Joshua is the leader. There's 2 million Jews. And he's ready to lead them across on this spiritual journey. Joshua started early the next morning and left Acacia Grove with all the Israelites. They went as far as the Jordan and stayed there before crossing. After 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord, your God, carried by the Levitical priest, you are to break camp and follow it. But keep a distance of about 1,000 yards before yourselves and the ark. Don't go near it, so that you can see the way to go. And watch this. For you haven't traveled this way before. We're going to cross the Jordan River. You stay behind the ark. You follow along, because where we are going, this is an incredible journey. It's a spiritual journey. And where we are going, you have never been before. We are crossing the Jordan. We're going to go across on dry land. You wait, you just see. And then when we get to the other side, none of us have ever been over there, because that is the promised land. That is where we will establish our heritage. That is where we will establish our nation. For you have not traveled this way before. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, because the Lord will do wonders among you tomorrow. And so tomorrow comes. The sun rises up, and sure enough, the Levitical priests, they move to the front. They're getting ready to cross the Jordan River. They have the ark. All of the leaders are scurrying everybody together. It's quite a job to get 2 million people across this river. But when they get to the river, it wasn't like when they woke up, the river was already split. No, the river is flowing. As a matter of fact, the Bible says, to make sure they understand, it was that flood stage, and it's flowing very fast. And so the Levitical priests, they are there with the ark, and they're holding the ark, and they're looking at the flowing water, and they're looking back at Joshua, and they're looking at the flowing water, and Joshua's like, that's the way we are going. You are to lead the way. You are taking us on this spiritual journey of faith. And so go. And then the Bible gives us a clip of the story, one that you cannot miss, because it's very, very clear. It says that when the first 2 of the Levitical priests holding the ark, when their feet touch the water, very clear, touch the water, it is in that moment, not before, not as they were back here hoping that it was going to, no, when the feet of the priest touch the water, then all of a sudden it begins to miraculously split. And you know those priests, they're like, oh, okay, good. And now they're walking, and as they're walking, the water is standing up on this side and standing up on that side. And Joshua had told him, you begin to walk, we'll follow after you and the ark. But when you get to the middle of the Jordan River, I want you to stop. And I want you to stand right there with the ark, and then everyone's going to pass right by you, but you stay in the middle. And again, put yourself there. Don't read through these stories if you've already heard them before, and take out the wonder, take out the fear, take out the miraculous. It's 2 million people, and they're walking across a river at flood stage, and the water has stood up. And now as they are walking, they're just normal people like me and you. As they're walking across on dry land, they're hoping that the Lord and Joshua and the priest know what they're doing, because they have their kids. They have all of their belongings. Everything they own is now in the middle of a river with water standing up on both sides. They absolutely are moving in faith. It's a spiritual journey, but along the way, they're like, man, it's a good thing the Lord is in control, as they watch the water. So they all kind of go past. Well, Joshua had already told them. He said, listen, there's 12 tribes, nation of Israel. I want one leader from each tribe. As you're going through, when you get to the middle where the ark is, look around on the riverbed and get 12 large stones. And as you and your tribe, you and your people are moving, I want a leader of that tribe to pick up the stone and carry it with them to the other side. And he says, and when you do this, the reason you're going to do this is because one day we're going to get on the other side. One day we're going to settle. And we're going to take these 12 stones, and we're going to make a pile of these 12 stones. We're going to create a Ebenezer, that's the Hebrew word. We're going to create a memorial, a visual that means something that you can see. So on your way through 12 tribes, get one leader and make sure you get one large stone, because there's going to come a day. There's going to come a day, the river's going to come back. There's going to come a day we are settled, and we're going to make this Ebenezer. We're going to make this memorial of these 12 stones. And your kids aren't going to remember, but when they go to you and say, what do these stones mean to you? You are going to tell them about the day we crossed the river miraculously following the Lord. So the 2 million people are going across. The last few people cross past the priest. They're holding the ark. They look back, there's nobody else left, so they begin to go out. And again, the Bible gets very descriptive. Make sure we see the clip of this. And as the priests carrying the ark, as the last person gets to the edge and comes up out of the Jordan River, out of where the water would be, whoosh, here comes the water. Why do you think in the Old Testament telling this story, they made sure to talk about when the foot hit the water, when the foot came up out of the water? I'm going to tell you in a little bit. And so they come up out of the Jordan River, and as they're moving towards where they're going to be, Joshua says, okay, grab those 12 stones, and we're going to pile them up over here. And we're going to find the place where we're going to kind of establish our home base. This is going to kind of be downtown. This is the place where everybody's going to come. So we're going to establish it here. We're going to put the 12 stones here, because this is going to be a place that when your kids come, and he tells them again, when your kids come and they ask you while you're in downtown area, and they've kind of forgotten, or maybe they were too young, and it's all just kind of turning into a different time, a different culture, a different time and setting. And your kids are going to be like, hey, Mom and Dad, every time we come here, you look at those 12 stones, and sometimes I can tell you're staring at them. Why is that? Joshua says, it's going to be incumbent upon you. You tell them, what do those stones mean to you as an individual? You tell them what it means to you as a young couple as you were coming across. You tell them what those stones mean to you. It is going to be a way of sharing your faith. It is going to be a way of understanding that we have just there was a day that we crossed this river, and it was miraculous. Because this crossing, listen, this crossing was a connection point. In the sense of the word we're using, it's the nexus, a connection point, or harmonious connection point. What was the connection point? We're going on a spiritual journey, and no longer is Moses our leader. We now are connected to Joshua. We no longer are roaming in the wilderness. We now are connected to the promised land. We no longer are people who are being disciplined by the Lord. We now are going to be people who are going to be blessed by the Lord as we go in. This river, this spiritual journey, vital. Why take the rocks from the middle of the river? Because it's the river. It's that dry bed, the miraculous, that you're going to tell your kids about. It was that moment in time where everything changed. It was that moment in time, that river crossing. It became the nexus. It became the connection point. So you get the rocks out of the river. You make a pile. And every time your kids ask you, when you're just chumming it up and talking, and you see those rocks, you remind them of the day we went on a spiritual journey. And this riverbed, this connection point, changed everything. So what do spiritual journeys do? Let's kind of go back through the story. I kind of laid it out for you. It's an incredible story. Sometimes if we grew up in church, we know some of these stories. Sometimes like, oh, yeah. I mean, think about what happened. This was an incredible spiritual journey. Here's what you need to know about spiritual journeys. Because we've invited you. We've invited ourselves, I should say. We're all on a spiritual journey together. This Nexus spiritual journey. Spiritual journey starts by stepping out in faith into the unknown. Every spiritual journey that's going to end somewhere where you want to be, that really changes you from the inside out, starts with a step of faith. Again, let's go back to the priest carrying the ark, getting ready to go into the water. When they get there, they're prayed up. Joshua has said this is what the Lord is, but remember, they're human. And they're carrying a heavy ark, stepping into a river at flood stage. And it wasn't until the water hits their feet that it separates. That's a step of faith. What are we talking about faith? Stepping into the unknown. We have to make sure we understand the difference between moving in strategy, moving in smarts, and moving in faith. I'll give you an example. If I walked up to this edge and I said, hey, by faith, I'm going to jump, and by faith, I'm going to land down there, that's not faith. That's gravity. Now, back in the day, if I was younger, I would actually jump right now. I'm way too old. My knees are too weak, so I'm not going to do that. But if I was to jump down and say, I'm jumping down here in faith, and I jumped over, that's not faith, that I'm going to land on the tile. That's not faith, that's gravity. If I said, I'm coming up here, and I'm going to step out, and then I'm going to levitate, that's faith. When they stepped into the river, they were just hoping. They had a confidence, absolutely, that the Lord was going. Don't miss that. In the Hebraic way of telling stories, when the feet of the priest hit the water, not until. Why? Because spiritual journeys take a step of faith. And for some of us, that's what freaks us out. We want to grow mature. We want to grow in faith. We want to do great things. We want to go to the promised land. But we're not sure if we really want to step out in faith where we're not sure, right? Again, if you're sure about what's going to happen, that's not faith in the sense of that type of faith. By the writer of Hebrews in the New Testament said faith without action is dead. So if I'm going to go on a spiritual journey, one that's really going to take me to a different type of place, then I will have to be willing to step in faith, not knowing the outcome. If you know the outcome, It's not a journey of faith. If you're like, well, certainly, again, that's called gravity. What do these stones mean to you when your kids ask you? That's what Joshua said. I guarantee you, as they walked by that 12 stones, that Ebenezer, and they pointed to those stones like, man, you were just a little guy. We had everything we owned. As we were walking across that riverbed, we were just praying. We were just praying we wouldn't end up like the Egyptians, because Grandpa had told us that story, how they all got washed down the river and they all drowned. So we were walking across, and then we came over here, and it actually worked. It was good. God showed up. What do those stones mean to you? Joshua said. You make sure you tell them about the step of faith. But also, a spiritual journey is the connection point to God's best destination. Again, that river, that's their connection point. Same is true for us. It's going to take a step of faith, but also as you're journeying together, it's going to get you to God's best if God has shown you and told you to go in that direction. Now, again, we've learned our new word. It's an SAT word, but it's also our whole theme, right? A spiritual journey is the nexus to God's best destination. It is the connecting point. It is a harmonious connecting point. The Jordan was the nexus, what? Between Moses and Joshua, the promised land, families being raised in the new land. It was a strategic, spiritual journey to go through this river. Why didn't the Lord say, I'm just going to snap my fingers and put everybody on the other side? Why didn't the Lord say, when you wake up tomorrow, you're not going to believe this. You're going to look at the Jordan River, and the water's going to be standing on its edge. It's going to be incredible. Why did the Lord say, go while it's still flowing, and nothing's going to happen till the priest put their feet in there? Because spiritual greatness is not achieved on the safety of the banks. Spiritual greatness, doing something with your one and only life, doing something that changes the world God's given you, leaving a lasting legacy. That doesn't happen in safety. It doesn't happen when everything makes sense. It just doesn't happen. This isn't a journey of all times, but there are times, just like this one, there are times like the one we are on, that if we're going to get to the promised land, if we're going to get to the destination that we feel like the Lord is leading, there's a sense of it is not safe. There's a sense of risk to it. And again, there's a sense of moving. And so we're asking people, I hope you've been reading along in our journal. Why are we doing that? Because we're doing it together. We're praying together. We're looking to each sacrifice as the Lord leads. We want to do something greater as a group than we could ever do alone. We want to create ministries that connects us to the next 25 years, connects us to the next generation, that does ministries now, but also after some of us are gone. This is, what do those stones mean to you? This is the ability to step into trust. If everything we always do, take Nexus out of it for a second, if everything you always do, when it comes to love, serve, give, and share, the living out your spiritual life, if it always, well, of course I know how it's going to work out because I've calculated. Oh, everything works out here. I do this, I do. Then you're not living by faith. People who aren't Christians do that. I'll do this when everything makes sense. I'll do this when I have all the results. I'll do this. There are times, not every week, not every year maybe, but there are times, a spiritual journey, it's going to start with the foot in the water, and it's going to be the nexus, the connection to your best destination, God's best destination for you. But also, and this is huge, especially think about Nexus for us and what this new building will be. Spiritual journey of faithfulness is the nexus to your kids' faithfulness in the future. It is the nexus to your kids' faithfulness. What do I mean by that? they're going to follow after you. Those of us who are in this, we still have children, right? Maybe our grandkids. They're going to follow after what you are doing. One of our challenges is, if we don't model the faithfulness of the past, what past? The people who got into the river and enabled this building to be built, this church to be built. Listen, without that faithfulness, there is no Lauren Rossamano coming here and Mr. Clint making fun of her name. There's no Lauren Rossamano coming here as a child and then a middle schooler and a high schooler and serving and having her life changed and then becoming Lauren Hall. That's not happening if Teen Church is not here. You see, too many times we live in the moment. Oh, this is what we do. We got to start living in the future, but we make our decisions based on the faithfulness of the past. And if we can't match that faithfulness, and if we're not faithful, then who's going to, what are they modeling? There's no modeling of this. You think about this idea of Joshua. What do these stones mean to you? They built it up. Even in the Bible, if you go through it, and you should go read the story, it'll even say, parenthetically with the story, and those stones are still there today. Are they still there today? No. He's reading a story. He's writing a story. They're not still stacked up there today. The stones are gone. The story goes on. Because the story is the spiritual part. It's the life-changing part of it. We're watching on TV right now, right? Over in Israel right now with all that mess going on, there's not a stack of stones. Oh, that's the stones. Yeah. And they're not there. But make no mistake about it. The stories, I just told the story. The living word of God, their stories as a nation of Israel, Jewish people, they're telling that story all the time. The stones are gone. Stories go on and on. And this is what we need to understand. Most of us already kind of understand this a little bit. The idea that there are certain places that have changed us, places we want to tie to our families. I grew up in Florida, not too far from Disney World, so people were always going to Disney World. And when you go to Disney World, people's like, I went to Disney World in the late 70s. We got a picture when our bell bottoms right here in front of Magic Kingdom Castle. And then I went there as a high schooler with my prom date. I got a picture right there in Magic Kingdom Castle. And then I went there as a kid with my family. I mean, when I went as parents, and I brought my kids right there in front of the Magic Kingdom, in front of the castle. And people said they brought their grandkids there. What's the beauty of all that? It's marketing genius. It looks the same now as it did in 1974. It's the same exact picture. And people, they go to Magic Kingdom, Disney World, they're like, this is so meaningful to me. These pictures, I remember being here. Again, I grew up there, so as a kid, I went to It's a Small World. I hated it. It's a small world. I went there as a teenager. Didn't like it then. I brought my kids there. Still don't like it. But you know what? It's the same doll. It looks exactly the same as when I went as a kid. Why? Because they know there's nostalgia in that. They also know that you're going to tell your stories. When you're back living in Ohio, when you're living wherever, you're not at Magic Kingdom all the time, but but you can start telling your kids, I want to take you back. I've heard people say this. I want to take you back to where I was a kid and get the same pictures. It's the stories. It's the memorization. This is what moves and changes. It's the same thing. Joshua said, when your kids ask you what those stones mean to you, what are you going to say? I want to encourage you, a little parenting time out, that as you're doing spiritual journey stuff, get your kids involved with it. As you love, serve, give, and share. I love it when people come here and we have clean teams, right? They come and they vacuum during the week and they wash windows and they clean toilets. And many times they'll bring their kids with them. And here are their middle school little kids watching mom and dad cleaning toilets and vacuuming. That kid doesn't have to wonder if their parents are all in. My mom's cleaning toilets. A part of. I've shared this when I do the parenting conference. I grew up. And in the mornings when I woke up, my parents were up before me. Didn't matter what day it was. School, church, didn't matter. Vacation. When I got up in the kitchen table, There's my mom and dad. Their Bibles opened up with their guidepost. You know what a guidepost is? With their guidepost, and they're doing their daily devotion. Saw that my whole life. Came home from college, they're still doing it. Do you think I ever wondered? I'm not sure if my parents believe the Bible. Never wondered it. Because they wouldn't be reading it. I never wondered if the Bible was valuable. I never wondered if church was valuable. I never wondered what they thought about God. Why? Because I saw it. And so we say it all the time, values are more caught than taught. And you see it, and you talk about it. That's what Joshua is doing here. When you see those stones, when your kids see those stones, you tell them what they meant to you. It's very important to get ourselves involved, in these stories. And that's what we talk about, this Nexus idea, right? I hope those of us who are parents, maybe grandparents, that as you are praying through, what are you going to do for next? What's the Lord asking you? And you kind of get a sense of it. I hope that you will do what so many people did when we moved in here, which is keep your kids, keep them up with it and tell them if they're old enough to understand. Maybe you're going to look at, you're a single mom, or maybe you're married, doesn't matter, and you're looking at it, and you're like, hey, we're going to give this for our year-end gift, and then also be able to give this because, every year we spend this much on Christmas, but this year we're going to spend this much on Christmas so that we can live simply, so people can simply live, and we're going to have this whole thing, the whole deal. Well, don't just do it. Bring your kids in. If they're old enough, and say, hey, this year we're going to reduce this and reduce that so that we can give sacrificially to this thing. And if they're kids, it's free you. I mean, we're building it. But just draw them into it. That's a huge spiritual aspect because at the end of the day, parents, who's responsible mostly for your kids' spiritual growth? You are. Pastors and teachers, we're going to help out. If you're new to the faith and you don't know, we're going to come. But at the end of the day, who's ever in the home, you're the greatest responsibility of that. So I'm encouraging you. All aspects of your spiritual journey, when your kids are old enough, start telling them the why. Start telling them what you're doing so they can see it and be a part of it. This is what Joshua said. He knows. You're only crossing the Jordan River once. So you tell them. Because this is how you're going to pass on your Christian faith and the faithfulness of the future. Why do you think this is so important? Why was it so important for Joshua? The story takes a crazy turn here. If you don't know it, I'm getting ready to blow your mind. They come up out of the Jordan River. Here come the priests. They're like, well, glad that worked. Come out. The water comes flowing back. They're now taking their 12 stones. They're going to figure out the best place. But this is not when that's happening right now. That's down in the future when they forgot. And so now the nation of Israel, they're kind of setting up camp. They got 2 million people. Do you know what's getting ready to happen? They didn't get to the promised land. It's not Disney World. It's not just, this is awesome. We don't have to do anything. They're now a part of the promised land. And now it's time to fight. Now it's going to be, we're now changing the world. We're bringing Yahweh to this new world. And something very strange, crazy happens immediately after they get out of the river. Let's read it. Joshua chapter 5. When all the Amorite kings across the Jordan to the west and all the Canaanite kings near the sea heard how the Lord had dried up the water of the Jordan before the Israelites until they had crossed over, they lost heart. We are so dead. And the courage failed because of the Israelites. Verse 2. At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the Israelite men again. What's going on here? They've come across the river. The Amorite kings, the Canaanite kings are like, did you see that? Our spies just came back and said 2 million people came across the river. When they came across the river, the water stood up. It was incredible. These idiots carrying this box came up. They're the last ones out. And the water came back through. There's 2 million people. These Israelites, they are here on our side. They think it's their promised land. They lost heart because they saw the power of God. And so make no mistake about it, your spiritual journey doesn't always take you to just la la land and utopia and living in Disney World. It takes you to the promised land where you now can make a difference. So now they're making a difference. These kings are like, uh-oh, we're not exactly sure how much time it is. In the Bible, it's one chapter. They're getting ready to go march around Jericho 7 times. The walls come falling down. They're getting ready to go to war. But let's go back. They cross over the river. And the Lord says to Joshua, sharpen up the flint knives. We're going to circumcise them again. Now, he doesn't mean the same people. He's talking about the Jewish men, those who are going to be fighting. And you got to push pause. Why is that? Oh, because now the Jewish males over at 13, but the Bible says especially those who were going to go and fight. You get the same thing, 18 to 24-year-olds, they never been circumcised. Why? Let's go back over here. Because over here, Moses leads them out of Egypt, and they're wandering around, and pretty soon now everybody's like, God's not being fair, we're not sure. And they start losing their faith. They stop doing the God thing. And now they're raising their kids. These are the same people who came across with Moses and saw the water and the chariots. And they're like, we love God. That's the same people who, when their kids now are starting to be raised and their boys, they didn't circumcise them. Which means they're like, yeah, God, whatever. They weren't raising them in our vernacular. They weren't raising them in the church. They weren't raising them under spiritual guidance. There was no fear of the Lord. So now, you fast forward 40 years, those people, because they were disobedient, God's like, no, we're not going to your dead. You're not going to go to the promised land. Moses, you had an anger issue. You didn't obey me. You're not going. A lot of people read that and they're like, God's not fair. I agree with you. It seems a little harsh, but that's how the story goes. And it just reminds us, there's a God, and we ain't it. So God says, Moses, you're not going. All you people, you lost heart. You haven't been raising your kids right. You're not going. So now this new generation is going across. Joshua is leading them across, and they get over here. They're not circumcised. And so guess what? You have to consecrate yourself, Joshua says, before we go and conquer. We have to make sure that we're spiritually ready. Dedication to the Lord should come before destination of the Lord. Oh, I'm going to go where the Lord wants me, but you're not right. You're not spiritually right. This is an incredible story. I had more people talking about this after first service than anything else. It is what it is. 19, 20-year-olds. Sharpen up the flint rock, boys. Read through the story. The story is very clear. They just kind of hung out for a couple weeks. But then they girded up their loins and they headed to Jericho. Isn't that crazy? You come across the river. Now we're going to be everything God wants us to be. Oh, look. The parents didn't do what they were supposed to do. So now the priest and Joshua has to do spiritually what should have been happening in the home. And I promise you, the physical sense, if this happens when they're 1, 2, 3 days old, a whole lot less pain than when you're 20. What was supposed to have happened now is going to happen. What's the learning for us? Dedication to God before you start on a destination of God. Meaning this. People ask me, so Nexus, Lubbock, Kenny, man, the new building, we got it all. Seems like a long time to be talking about Nexus. You know why? Because it's a spiritual journey. It's a weekly thing. We've given you time to pray. Listen, we don't accomplish what we think the Lord's asking us to do as individuals, come together collaborative. If it's just some knee-jerk thing out here, it's got to be a dedication. You got to pray. We got to do this thing together. It's a spiritual journey. And it's going to be incredible. The same thing we did when we journeyed from Butler to here. Those who were here. We took 2 months and said there's got to be a connection from a church that doesn't have a building to a church that has a building. But also there's a maturity. And so just hear me say, there's no shrinking back. That we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. It's a journey. And many of us probably weren't ready to read and pray. And we want to get ready to make sure that when we make a commitment, not a knee-jerk reaction, but it's really what the Lord has asked us to do. It's what the Lord has asked us to do. We're on a spiritual journey, friends. And this is as critical as it was in 2005. It's just as critical, in a sense, for us as that river crossing. We don't do this all the time, but there'll come a day. There'll come a day, a year from now, 2 years from now, whenever we break ground, 5 years from now, maybe your kids will be like, hey, what is that Nexus logo? What is that building? Mom, Dad, what does that mean to you? Grandma, Grandpa, what does that mean to you? And you'll have something. I hear it all the time, the people who were here, who helped build this place so that so many hundreds of middle schoolers and high schoolers can have the same type of testimony as Lauren and Justin and so many more, my kids. So we're inviting you to be a part of this journey so that when we get to the destination, you have stories to tell. Faithfulness, a part of what God was doing. I hope that's true of you. So what do? Been saying it forever. It's on the website. We're sending all this stuff out, right? Because not everybody's here on Sunday morning, right? And so what do? We're asking everybody just to pray. Just pray, 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 pray. We want you to listen to the Lord. And whatever the Lord asks you to do, then you obey. We do this every year for the year-end gift. We have a Nexus year-end gift. And so we're asking people to sacrificially pray, sacrificially listen, and then give whatever the Lord asks you to give sacrificially to the year-end gift, which goes to, remember, the first 135 goes to our Go Missions, AJ and Liberty Holt. Go Missions, first 135. If the year-end gift is $136,000, 135 goes out, we keep $1,000. Whee! After that, we got to get the sewer in, right? So now it's the year-end gift. The next 45 is going to get us the sewer. We got to get the sewer. We got to get a capacity. And after that, everything goes towards that first building. They've enabled us to see what is the Lord doing and how fast can we move. That's the year-end gift. And then on your way out, we're going to give you these pledge cards. There's pledging for 25 months. Why 25 months? Because the church turned 25 years. Also, it's a 2-year plan. That's why this whole thing takes like 2 years. Well, why are we doing it now if it's not for 2 years? Because you can't plan it. You have to plan to get there, right? So we have the pledge cards. On December 3rd, we're going to ask you, I hope you will make plans to be here. On December 3rd. December 3rd, kicking off our Christmas. It'll be all Christmas like it always is. But before we kick off Christmas, we're going to bring our pledge card. On your way out, you'll get one of these, and we're using the hard copy. You can definitely, we want you to do it online. It's all digital. We're all cool that way. But there's something about having this. It's why Joshua said, grab the stones. Something you can see. On your way out, we're giving you a stone. What do you do with it right now? Nothing. Just take it. Read through it. The sheet we gave you, read through it. Start to pray. So that by December 3rd or by the end of the year, you can turn it back in. Digitally, definitely on December 3rd, you'll bring it, and you're going to pledge. What do I want? What is the Lord asking us to do as a family, as a singles, friends, over a 20-month period, 25-month period? Don't know, but you take this. So on your way out, you get one of these, take it home, and if I've got kids in my house, which I do, I'm going to sit it right where they can see it, and we're going to talk about it. Hey, Dad, what does that card mean to you? Let me tell you. Hey, what does that mean? Well, this is what we're going to do. Just talk it through. That's why we're taking so long to get to the December 3rd. Christmas is going to be wonderful. We're taking a while to get, because this is a spiritual journey. And I hope that you'll join us on the journey.